In the last video, we created a Zoom to Fit button rather quickly. In this video, we'll come back and talk about why that worked. I'm going to highlight an area of my spreadsheet and again pretend that there's a dashboard there. And the desire was to create a button up here so we could always zoom to fill up the screen with that selected area or that dashboard. We need the developer tab to do that. If you don't have it, you can just right click and customize the ribbon and come down here and check developer tab. I already have it. So if I go to the developer tab, that's where we inserted the form control. We chose the button. But what we're going to do right now is open the Visual Basic editor. Visual Basic for Applications is the programming language that these macros are written in. It's part of Microsoft Office Suite. And one of the things that we see in the editor over here is the books that we have open. Right now I only have book1.xls open. It has some sheets in it. Actually, it only has one sheet in it. And it has an object called a workbook that we should do some code, could do some code on, but we won't. It's beyond the scope of this video. What this video is going to talk about is what happens when we insert a button. If I insert that button, the only thing you can do with a button is run a macro. So the first thing it wants to know is which macro to run. And it says, well, a good thing to name that macro might be button 1 click. If you click button 1, that would be a logical macro name to run. And I could get that either by writing a new macro over here or recording a macro, which is about 1,000,000 times easier. It's also a great place to start with some code that you might want to edit later. I could store that macro, or in this case, we're just looking for the macros. I could look for other macros that exist already, either in this workbook, which happens to be book 1, or in all my open workbooks. But in my case, I'm just going to record the macro, and I'm going to assign it that shortcut, Control-Shift-Z. And since the only place I would ever want to use this macro is in this workbook, I'll just leave that as this workbook. I'll say OK. And look what happens. Now we have modules over here. We have a folder called modules. It has one module in it. You would think clicking on that would allow you to see that module, but it doesn't. You have to double click and then you can see the module. So we're actually recording as we go here. We're recording the macro named button 1 click, and this is just a comment. Any of these green single quotes mean comments, and any text that follows them will be green and means comments. And it added the comment that our shortcut for this macro is Control-Shift-Z. If I changed that to a Y, it would not change which key ran this macro. That's just a comment. Another place to do that. Let's go ahead and record something. Let's select the area that we're going to want to zoom to. And look what happened. It selected A1 to I11, and then it activated I11. Activated just means that it left the highlighted cell here. So if I were to start to type, that would be where that text would go, is in the active cell. It doesn't matter which cell is active if all you're going to do is zoom. So I could come and delete that line later just to make it simpler, but I don't have to. I'll go to View and Zoom to Selection. And now look what it recorded. It said active window.zoom equals true. So it zoomed to my selection. Now, since I don't want to leave all of this selected and looking gray in my presentation, and I never know how far in or out I'll be zoomed, I guess I know exactly how far in this one. But it's always good practice to just come up here to the upper left. So clicking on A1 recorded another line of code over here. It said range A1.select. We're not worried about the syntax over here, but it's just kind of cool to see what's going on. Might help us learn a little bit of VBA in case we want to edit some later. When I hit this stop button, now I'm no longer recording over here and I have a macro. As I said, there's really no point in activating this cell. So I really have about a 3-line macro. I can put a name on the button by right-clicking, edit text, and typing the name, and I can save the file as normal, File, Save As, find a location. But when I do, if I try to save it as a type of just my regular XLSX file, it's going to give me an error. It says, hey, you've got a macro in there, and this is a macro-free workbook. Meaning if somebody sends me an XLSX, I don't have to worry about it having viruses. But if someone sends me an XLSM, a macro-enabled workbook, I might want to be a little bit careful, think about whether it might have viruses or not. Think about whether I trust the source, and I already had a book named that. So now we have our XLSM, and that's one way that this macro, since it's part of book 1, will follow this book anywhere it goes. But what if I had macros that I wanted to write and just use them from my computer every day? For example, let's say I just wanted a macro that would enter my name into whatever cell I selected. Maybe my name were long and I forgot to spell it or something. I don't know, I got lazy. So let's just say enter Tom's name. I'm recording this macro because I hit the record button down here. And I won't give it a shortcut key, but I want to store it someplace that it's always available. So if I just do it in this workbook with the dashboard, then it's only going to be available when that workbook is open. But Excel would create me something called a personal macro workbook if I asked it to. Notice there's not one now, but when I hit record or hit OK to start recording, it created this personal.xlsb. B for binary, it just takes up less space that way and Excel can read it more quickly. So the XLSB has some objects in it. It's actually got a sheet. It's by default hidden, and it has the module that I'm recording in. So if I click on module 1, nothing happens. But if I double click on module 1, I go to enter Tom's name, and it's recording this macro. It's ready to go. So when I come here, type my name, then not only did it select that cell, but it put my name in that cell and then selected the cell below it when I hit return. Now certainly don't, because I should probably stop recording. Certainly don't want to put it in V12 every time, so I might want to come over here and edit that macro a little bit. And I really don't care that it select V13 after I enter it. So I have a one-line macro. It's stored in the personal XLSB. And notice down here, you've wondered why I have this window open. This is File Explorer showing this directory called Excel Start. On the C drive, under my username, under some Microsoft directories. Whatever I put in Excel Start will open anytime I run Excel. And so that's where it's going to store this as soon as I close it down and hit save. In fact, I'll bet if I hit save right now, it did. It created the personal XLSB. You don't need to know that's going on behind the scenes. After you close out of Visual Basic and close out of Excel and come back, the personal XLSB will be there. You can view it by going to View and unhide the workbook, personal XLSB. And sometimes I like to keep some notes in that because it's always available for Excel, but it's mainly for storing those macros. So I'm going to go back to View and hide it. And now it's hidden. If I close down Excel, open it back up, personal XLS will be there hidden. So if I wanted to, say, put a personal fitness log in this same directory, then every day when I opened up Excel, that personal fitness log would open up as a worksheet. Let's give that a try. Let's say File, save a copy, and I'm going to browse to it, but I'm not sure I can find that path, so I'm going to come down here and copy it from right here and paste it into here and say personal. Interesting, personal used twice there. Let's say my fitness log. And so now I have this file, my fitness log, down here. And we'll call this my fitness log. If I close that, close Excel and reopen it, let's see what all opens up. Sure, save the changes. And it knows that the personal macro workbook is in there, even though it's hidden. I'll just say save. Now when I come back to Excel, I see my fitness log opens right away just by opening the application Excel, because my fitness log was in this directory. I don't see the personal.xlsb until I come up here to View, and let me just show you what that really says. Unhide this file. And now I see the blank sheet in personal XLSB that's not even being used. It's just a blank workbook. But if I went to Visual Basic Editor over here, I would see both the fitness file and the macro file. Could double click on this one and see that macro. So I hope that was a good introduction for how you can not only add a macro to just any file and then store it within that file, but also to add macros to your personal.xls that Excel will always have available for you. Hope that helps.